Tender Strands by Martin Dempsey. Chapter 26. Communal. So Mr. Cavell fell into the engineering pit as he leant over to check on your partner. Yes, Smith confirmed. Explain to me then how it came to be that the pit's elevator was lowered to such a depth. I can't say. It's my personal belief that Clark tripped over the switch, which was laying on the floor. To my mind, that would explain her ankle cuts, how overwhelmed she became from the vapor and potentially smoke billowing out from under the elevator, and why the elevator had lowered. It's possible that Mr. Cavell was also overcome by the fumes as he tended to Clark. If that was so, the switch would be a trip hazard? Yes. Suggesting that either Mr. Clark himself or one of his employees would be potentially liable for the injuries to Miss Clark and to Mr. Cavell himself from his fall and subsequent exposure to the chemical fumes below. That would be my understanding, but I'm not a lawyer. Mr. Smith, is it your belief that Mr. Cavell, was a drug dealer? It's a distinct possibility. I don't know the state of the current investigation into his financial affairs, but I'm under the impression he is affluent and that he comes from a wealthy background. I'm also under the impression that a tox screen showed that he had been exposed to large quantities of lao and tannis root, which might account for the overdose of serotonin, which has him currently in a coma. Were he and his driving staff engaged in the trade of tannis and lao, and potentially other substances, that would also account for the deaths which have been associated with both an overdose of serotonin, if lao use can cause such an overdose, and who had used his taxiderm within the immediate time frame of their overdoses. Well, lao is currently being reviewed pending possible legislation and regulation, but if Mr. Cavell or his drivers were able to have sold or given lao to those customers, that would, as of the time, be perfectly legal. Mr. Smith, did you push Mr. Cavell into the pit? No. Did you find your partner injured and unconscious and decide to enact some rough justice? No. You declined medical attention on the site of the fire once medical staff arrived, is that right? I didn't need any. That's not the same as declining it. One of the ambulance staff wrote in his account that your shirt was covered in blood. That was Clark's. You ran back to the building after placing your partner on the floor just outside the floor? Yes. You know you should have waited until trained rescue staff arrived, yet you did so anyway? Yes. Mr. Smith, where is your firearm? I don't know. I believe I lost it as I climbed down to get the suspect off the elevator plate. I was feeling extremely dizzy and confused at that point from the effects of the vapor, I now believe. Mr. Smith, would it surprise you to hear that we've not recovered your firearm? Not at all. And why not? It's on my bedside table, Smith thought. If I lost it in the cellar of that building, and given the structures were above collapsed completely onto it, and that several of the gas tanks in the building exploded, it might take quite a while before they find it, if ever. I was also very careful to place the gas tanks against the supporting wall for precisely that effect, he added in his own internal monologue. Mr. Smith, you've since applied for a course of psychiatric assistance via your union membership. Yes. May I ask why? You don't have to answer that. It is confidential. I just want to get a clear understanding of the scope of any potential effects and liabilities this incident has. I have reoccurring nightmares about the events that happened, and I've developed a phobia. A phobia? Yes. A phobia of what? I'd rather not say. Thinking about it makes me uncomfortable. Oh, so it's really that... Smith nodded. For the first time in the interview, the investigating officer registered genuine discomfort in the hitherto implacable and clearly well-rehearsed agent. The internal affairs officer himself took a quick sip of his water bottle. Smith had yet to touch his. If the account he, Agent Clark, and the union had worked out together was actually true, then Smith was a hero, and as of yet there had been no significant evidence to contradict their account. Given that this was the third interview of Smith, and given that Clark had declined to be interviewed again, citing her ongoing medical issues with memory loss, there was really only one last line of attack which needed to be worked out to show due diligence in the light of the possibility of pending legal action by Cavell's relatives. Mr. Smith, You're aware that Mr. Cavill's relatives have issued letters of disclosure on the grounds of potential liability case? Yes. Mr. Smith, are you aware of the grounds of their case? No. No? I have a very rough idea of what might be involved. A rough idea? Nothing I could speak to. Mr. Cavill and his family are descended from a globe-spanning lineage of people believed to have originated near the Ho Kin Huang region, who are currently applying for recognition to the UN as a distinct ethnic group. Are you aware of Mr. Cavill's links to this group? No. Have you heard of the Holy Abominable group? No. You don't frequent the site Correlated Contents? I've heard of it, but I don't believe I've ever used it. Some law enforcement agents who are currently under internal investigations have recently been found to have been active posters on the Holy Abominable board of the Correlated Contents site, and one of these agents has been involved in the ongoing investigation of Lao, which, as you know, is pending possible classification as an illegal narcotic. No doubt this case and the deaths involved will be included in the evidence presented in the upcoming hearing. The Internal Affairs Officer looked up sharply. There was a suggestion of mockery in Smith's tone. You'll appreciate that if it's perceived that this event was in any way motivated by hatred against a particular group of people on grounds of their heritage, that would be a serious issue. Now, of course, given my own background, I'm very sensitive to such issues. My relatives were involved in the Massachusetts rounds up to the early 30s. Oh, I wasn't aware. I see. Right. I don't use the internet much. I'm sure my online presence has already been investigated, and I've disclosed what little social media I already use. I don't post to, nor have I ever posted to, correlated contents. Everything I've heard about it suggests it's a bit of a conspiracy theory cesspit. Serpent people and the like. All right. The Internal Affairs Officer looked up. Is there anything else you feel you would want on the record? Anything at all? Smith nodded. I plan to visit Mr. Cavill in hospital to pass on my best wishes. Would that be allowed? The interviewer raised his eyebrows in surprise. Then, as he nodded his head side to side, said, so long as you have no interaction with his family, and so long as he remains in a coma, that should be all right. Should his condition improve, you're to have no interaction with him. Dream Journal. October the 1st. First use of Lao. Brian Eno. It's perfect. This is it. This is what I've been hoping to create, or find, all this time. My first visit to the beach, and I dearly hope not my last. If there is a way to find happiness in this world, I can find it here.